Hello, this is Clay from thejapanshop.com. If you're a Makoto Plus member, please see the description below to see your download bonus with a PDF and sound files for this lesson. If not, you can just follow along with this video, or you can check out makotoplus.com and become a member for free for the first 7 days. Let's get started. We're going to look at this Shinchan manga, but before we get into this, let's listen to Yumi read and go through it. If you don't understand it, that's fine. We're going to go through every panel of this page afterwards, but listen to her, try to figure out what's going on.
しんちゃんとママのおバカな一日編その9アクション幼稚園職員室ぬしんのすけくんお構いなくそうはいかない職員室に入るときはなんて言うんだっけ忘れちゃったのダメだな、組長。失礼しますって言うんだよ。わかってるなら、やって。ところでなんか用それは先生のセリフです。じゃ、言っていいよ。ありがとう。ところで、何か用缶蹴りやるから、缶探しに来たの。空き缶全部ゴミの日に出しちゃったな。これでいいよ。フルーツ缶詰。これからお客さんに出すからダメ。何かを訴える子供の眼差し攻撃。キラキラキラ。そんな目で見ないで。
And we're back. Let's go through this line by line, and then we'll listen to Yumi one more time at the end, and hopefully you'll understand more at that point. The title is Shinchan, which is this little boy, his name is Shinchan, and mother, mama, so Shinchan to mama no obaka na ichinichi hen. So obaka here, because baka can mean, of course, idiot or fool, but here it's kind of a playful silliness. So it's a silly day, ichinichi, one day, a day in the life of a silly day in the life of Shinchan and his mother. Hen here, hen means a chapter. But in this case with the manga, it just means this is a group of the shorts, of the short mangas, the panel manga under this header. Sono Kyu just means the 9th in this series. That doesn't really matter too much, and we see a picture of him with his kira kira stars here, which we'll see in just a moment what that means. Let's get started with the first panel. This gives us the setting. So, Action Youchien. Action is kind of like the old Bugs Bunny cartoons where it was always Acme, the company or the buildings were always Acme. Well, in Shinchan world, it's Action. I'm sure it's a playoff of Acme, but Action Youchien is the name of the Youchien, which is the kindergarten. So Action Kindergarten. Shokuinshitsu. Shokuinshitsu means the teacher's room or the staff room. It's interesting if you look at the kanji here. Shoku here means employment or occupation. In means employee or staff member. And shitsu means room. So it could apply for any staff room, any business, it sounds like, but I think from just my experience, and maybe I'm wrong, I need to look this up a little bit more, but I think this is mostly just used in the context of schools. So most likely, shokuinshitsu should be translated as teacher's room, or the teacher's lounge. Okay, so here's the Encho. The Encho is the principal. I think it's called the Encho for Youchien, for kindergartens, is the principal of the kindergarten. And he's working really hard. And then suddenly in the next panel, we have Shinchan come in. This is our hero, Shinchan. And you'll notice that there's a little hiragana nu just above Shinchan. That means it's onomatopoeic sound that describes his coming into the teacher's room unannounced. He's just popping his head in quietly, stealthily. He's not telling anybody. He's just walking in. Of course, he's not supposed to do that. He's a student. He should say "shitsurei shimasu," which we'll see in just a moment. And then you see him move down here, and he says, which just means, I'm thinking, what is this? What's going on? He's searching for something. And of course, the principal notices him, and he says, Shinnosuke-kun? So Shinchan is what he's normally called in the manga and by his parents and friends, but his real name is Shinnosuke. Shinnosuke-kun. Shinnosuke-kun. And Shinnosuke-kun or Shinchan says, Okamainaku is a polite way to say, oh, please don't bother yourself. I can do it myself. Of course, that's not what he's supposed to be doing. He's not even supposed to be in the shokuin shitsu. But the principal says, so wa ikanai. I cannot allow that to happen. That's not going to work. I can't let you do this. So refers to what Shinchan just said, that, as for that, ikanai, it cannot be allowed. So let's skip down to the next panel. 職員室に入るときはなんて言うんだっけ? 職員室に in the teacher's room 入るときは as for the time you enter, sometimes going backwards works really well. As for, so the wa sets the topic here. As for the time 入る entering に into 職員室teacher's room. So as for the time whenever you enter the teacher's room, nante, in what way or what? Yun dakke. Dakke means kind of, do you remember what was that? It's often used when you forget something and you're trying to jog your memory and you're trying to ask somebody to jog your memory for you. So it could mean that the principal has forgotten what to say. Of course, it's not that case because the principal is trying to jog Shinchan's memory and to teach him that he should politely express himself whenever he enters the teacher's room. He should say, "Shitsurei shimasu." Okay, so whenever you enter the teacher's room, what should you say? What was it that you should say? And then, of course, Shinchan takes it to mean that the principal forgot what he was supposed to say. And he says, 忘れちゃったの? ダメだな, kumicho. 失礼しますって言うんだよ. So, 忘れちゃったの? Did you forget? Chatta is a casual form of 忘れてしまいました. 忘れてしまった. 忘れちゃったの? Did you forget? ダメだな. It's no good. It's terrible. What you're doing is really bad because you're the principal. And Shinchan doesn't call him Aincho, which I believe Aincho is what's used for kindergarten principals. I could be wrong about that. I'll look it up. But Kumicho is what Shinchan calls the principal. Now, Kumicho is used most likely if you say just out of the blue, Kumicho, it's going to refer to a Yakuza boss. So if you look at the principal's face, he kind of looks a little scary. And Shinchan always kind of plays on that and calls him Kumicho rather than Aincho. So, dame da na, Kumicho. It's no good. It's terrible that you forgot this. And then Shinchan goes on to explain to the principal, to Kumicho, what you should say when you enter into the teacher's room. Shitsurei shimasu. Shitsurei shimasu means excuse me for being rude. Te yun da yo. Te is a quotation marker, so he's quoting the shitsurei shimasu. Te yun da yo. You is how you say it. Da yo is explaining. So that's how you say it. It's no good. I can't believe that you forgot this. That's not good for you being the boss. You should say, excuse me for being rude. And of course, Kumicho, the principal in this mark here means he's getting a little upset. He's getting a little angry. He says, wakatteru nara yatte. Wakatteru means to know or knowing or being in the know. Wakatteru nara if you understand, if you know, yatte, do it. So in other words, he's saying, you know what to say. Just do it. When you come into the teacher's room, you should say, 失礼します。ところで, by the way. ところで, by the way. So he finished this conversation, and then Shinchan looks up at him and says, by the way, ところで, nanka yo. Nanka means something. It's kind of a slangy way to say something. Yo is business, or do you have something you need to do? Or what did you want, basically? So Shinchan comes into the room, and he looks at the principal and says, what did you want? Even though he's the one who actually came into the teacher's room. And then we see in this line, he says, それは先生のセリフです。それは, as for that, what you just said, ところでなんかよ。それは先生のセリフです. Now I want to talk about this for a second. 先生のセリフです literally means that's the teacher's line. So セリフ means line, like an actor's line, or a line that's read. それは先生のセリフです. Now he could have said それは私のセリフです. That's my line. But he says 先生. So unlike in English, oftentimes people will refer to their occupation, like especially if they're talking to someone lower. So the teacher is speaking, or the principal teacher is speaking to a student. So instead of saying 私, he will say 先生 or 園長 or something like that. His occupation, who he is, his tachiba, his position, and say 先生のセリフです. That's the teacher's line, or in other words, that's my line. ところでなんかよ. So, what did you want? Shinchan asks, and the Aincho, the principal, says, that's what I should be saying. That's my line. You're taking my line. So anyway, sensei, even though he's referring to himself, instead of saying watashi, personal pronouns are not used nearly as much in Japanese as they are in English. And in place of that, you can put the occupation. And that's also very good when you're speaking to someone, especially someone you just met, but really anyone, your friends too. Don't say anata, anata, anata. Once in a while it can be okay, but it can also sound very rude, especially if it's someone who is older than you or higher up in social status. So instead of saying anata, use their occupation. If it's a sensei, if it's a teacher, you say sensei, whatever. If it's anybody else, then you might use their last name. If you don't know their last name, then use their occupation if you know it. And then Shinchan says, じゃあ、言っていいよ、言っていいよ. Well then, 言っていいよ. 言って means say it. いいよ is good, it's fine. You may say it. So in other words, Shinchan is giving the principal the permission to say the line that the principal just said was his. So Shinchan said a question, what did you want? And the principal says, that was my line. And then Shinchan says, well, you can say it. I'll allow you to say it. And then the principal says, arigato. So normally this would be arigato, longer. The vowel will be longer, but he's kind of flustered. It's kind of just arigato, like that. And you can see he's crying rivers now. Arigato. And then he just copies the same thing that Shinchan said. Tokoro de nanika yo. Now, one difference though. Tokoro de is the same. Tokoro de, however, or by the way, nanika yo is what the principal said. And Shinchan said, nanka yo. Nanka, as I mentioned earlier, is much more, is kind of casual. Nanika is more polite. So the principal is using a little bit more polite language. Now let's skip down to the last lines here. Kankeri yaru kara. So kankeri, kan is like a can, like this, the fruits can here. Kankeri, keri means to kick. So it's a childish game of kicking the can, and I think it has something to do with like onigoko, where you hide and go seek, and the oni has or the people who go to hide, they kick the can, and the oni has to go and get the can, and then once the oni gets the can, can go find the other people. I think that's what that game is. Kankeri yaru kara. We're going to play kankeri. So kan, the can, sagashi ni kitta no. I've come in search of cans. I need a can. I'm looking for a can. And then the principal replies to that and says, Akikan zenbu gomi no hi ni dashichatta na. So the empty cans, akikan is empty cans. Akikan zenbu, all of them. Gomi no hi is the day that you put out the trash. Now in Japan, unlike in America, for example, you have certain days for recyclables and cans as well as plastic and burnable days and so forth. And so akikan zenbu gomi no hi ni, on the day for the akikan, I already put them all out. So in other words, he's saying there aren't any. Dashichatta. This is as I think Shinchan used chatta earlier. It's used to mean totally in many ways, completely, or to finish. So in other words, dashichatta implies that the principal already put out every bit of the empty cans, the akikan. Akikan is the empty cans. Nah, just kind of like emotional, like, nah, he's trying to think maybe, but he's like, well, it's a shame, but I don't have any empty cans. And then Shinchan sees this fruits kanzume. Fruits kanzume. Kanzume is the canned whatever, in this case, fruits. And Shinchan points at this can, which is not opened. It's not an akikan. And he says, Kore de ii yo. Kore de ii yo. Shinchan says, I'll take this one. This one's fine. This one's good. And then the principal says, Kore kara okyakusan ni dasu kara dame. Kyakusama could be customers, but here, because it's a school, it's whenever they get a visitor. Now, I don't know if you've ever been to a Japanese school and been invited to the principal's room, as a foreigner, especially if you're going there to teach English or just to experience the Japanese school and get a tour of it and stuff. You might be invited to the teacher's room, to the shokuinshitsu, and then the kocho sensei's room. The kocho sensei is the principal's room for most schools. I think kindergarten is eincho, but I'm not sure. But like middle school and so forth would be kocho sensei. So when you're invited into the kocho sensei's room, you will be probably given ocha, tea, and some biscuits or crackers, or in this case perhaps fruits. And that's what he's saving it for whenever they have a guest. So whenever a guest comes, this is for them. So you can't have it. But the final, it actually goes on another couple of pages, but I'm going to stop here because it kind of wraps it up here. Now this is an aside. It's what the author wrote. This isn't what Shinchan says or the principal says, but 何かを訴える子供の眼差し攻撃。何かを something, there's something, it's a little ambiguous. 訴えるmeans, it can mean a lot of things, including like court cases and suing, but in this case it means to plead or to appeal. So the child is appealing with his eyes. 子供の眼差し攻撃。攻撃 means attack. 子供の眼差し, the look of a child. 攻撃, his attack. So something about it, he's appealing for something with his look. And of course you can see the stars coming out from Shinchan's eyes. And here you have the katakana kira, 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 which is the same word for like twinkle, twinkle, little star, kira, kira. I don't remember how it goes in Japanese, but twinkle, twinkle is kind of sparkling, twinkling. And the principal grabs the fruit can and hoards it and says, "This is mine," right? And he says, "Sonna meide minaide, don't look at me like that. With such eyes, sonna meide, with de would be like with such, sonna me." I, with such eyes, minaide, don't look. And of course it means at me. So even though the principal grabs it and says, "Don't look at me like that," we know on the next page, which I'm going to stop here, on the next page that the principal gives Shinchan the can. And how do we know it? Because Shinchan is carrying the empty can and eating something. So he's eating the fruit that was in the can. Well, I hope this was helpful. Manga can be a fun and quick and good way to learn, but it can also be very difficult because this is obviously written for native speakers of Japanese. But now that we've gone through this closely in every panel and gone through the vocabulary, let's listen to Yumi one more time, and hopefully you'll figure it out and understand more what's going on. Hi, listen.
しんちゃんとママのおバカな一日編その9アクション幼稚園職員室ぬしんのすけくんお構いなくそうはいかない職員室に入るときはなんて言うんだっけ忘れちゃったのダメだな組長失礼しますって言うんだよわかってるならやってところでなんか用それは先生のセリフです。じゃ、言っていいよ。ありがとう。ところで、何か用缶蹴りやるから、缶探しに来たの。空き缶全部ゴミの日に出しちゃったな。これでいいよ。フルーツ缶詰。これからお客さんに出すからダメ。何かを訴える子供の眼差し攻撃。キラキラキラ。そんな目で見ないで。
How'd you do? Did you understand more? And remember, if you're a Makoto Plus member, you can download a free PDF and sound file of this lesson. And if you're not a member, please consider becoming a member. And if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do so. It helps. And any comments in the comment section below would be appreciated. I'll try to answer any questions if you have them. Until next time, bye.
チャンネル登録してね。